Okay, Senate Education returning to H81. Mr. Nichols, thanks for your testimony and for raising the issue that you raised. Ms. Glowski, please.
Thank you, Chair Campion. I think you're going to be happy to hear that I'm going to try to use the Senator Doyle approach this afternoon. As I understand it, to state the problem and propose the solution. So I only have a page and a half of written testimony. It's posted on your website. And I don't think we need to pull it up. But as we see it, the problem is that Section 4 of H81 removes the following language from the current law. You're going to be familiar with this because we've talked about it a lot. It's the premium responsibility percentage and out-of-pocket expenses for each plan tier for the participating employees. That language is removed from the law in H81. It's crossed out. And the removal of this language is a significant policy change that tips the scales in favor of one side. So the solution is adding balancing language to Section 6 of H81 so that it reads, and in my written testimony, I've put the new language in bold, but it is in reaching a decision, the arbitrator or arbitrators shall determine which of the two submissions most appropriately balances appropriate access to healthcare benefits and reasonable cost containment to ensure the financial sustainability of the plan. And as you know, there are 5 factors currently in the law that the arbitrator has to consider. And we have recommended adding 2 factors to the law: actuarial value and percentage increase or decrease in ed spending that is likely to occur. And we do understand through your committee discussion that the committee is not going to add those 2 factors. So given that, we strongly urge you to add the balancing language that I just spoke of. And we strongly urge you to add that to the bill, making clear to the arbitrator that balancing is required is the crux of the matter. It will also add an appropriate and necessary guide for the employer and employee negotiators. Striking a balance between appropriate access and cost is the reason bargaining occurs. Adding balancing language will not cause the bill to be unbalanced. It is what is needed to rebalance H81. In conclusion, I ask you to please ask yourselves how your decision on H81 will appear to school boards and the Vermonters in the communities that they and you represent. You have received letters from school board chairs posted on the committee's website showing you that the cost of providing health benefits is causing a reduction in student opportunities in many districts. The language removed from current law by H81 regarding premiums and out-of-pocket was a cost control measure in the law. If you're not willing to put in balancing language after giving the employee side a major policy change in their favor, what kind of message does that send about what is important to the Senate Education Committee? Thank you.
Well, there we go. Throwing down the gauntlet, I guess, in some regards. Let's see. Committee. Comments, questions for Ms. Glowski. Please, Senator Chittenden.
So, Ms. Glowski, I appreciate this. I love how you framed this piece. So I love the Doyle approach. What I'm trying to reconcile with what you presented to me is what I think I understand to be the current in statute language of Act 11, which I can paste this into the chat, but there is already some language that will still govern this next negotiation addressing the cost of things. I'm reading that in reaching a decision, the arbitrator or arbitrators shall give weight to the evidence, documents, written material, arguments presented, following factors, including the financial ability of the educational fund and school districts across the state to pay for the cost of healthcare benefits and coverage. And it goes on, comparisons of healthcare benefits, also the average consumer prices for goods. And so what I can't reconcile is why do we need this additional language when I see the existing language always already addressing or forcing the arbiters to address cost and the ability of the school districts to pay? Where am I missing something?
So Senator Chittenden, I think what you're missing is that By taking out the language regarding premiums and out of pocket, that's cost control language that's in the statute. That's being taken out. So even though you've got those five factors were there the first time. But if there's not any balancing language that's added, it's going to be the statute becomes out of balance by taking out that premium and out of pocket language.
May I follow up?
Senator Chittenden, yes.
The testimony from Jeff Fannin, I tried to raise that point as well, and he had a good counterpoint, which is arguing that this language just allows that to be negotiated. So we're not deciding that it's definitely going to be at different tiers. It just gives this group, just like the VSEA, to put it on the table that we will agree or not to have it at the same levels. But instead, our committee here is not saying that it has to be at the different levels, but that during your negotiating process, they can use that as one of the things to find an equitable agreement to benefit all of their constituents, while also keeping in mind our ability to pay for these services. Is that not a fair statement, that this is just allowing for them to negotiate whether or not there will be different tiers and not mandating that there will be different tiers?
It's not mandating that there'll be different tiers, but it is allowing it to be negotiated. And if it can be negotiated, then it can be in a last best offer and be chosen by the arbitrator. So it can be imposed by an arbitrator. And it's very important to have language in the statute that guides the arbitrator, because unfortunately, the arbitrator has not sat in on all these committee meetings and heard what all of us think is important and what you think is important. They need to look at what the language is in the law. And so it needs to be clear in the law.
The last piece, Chair.
Yes.
So I'm struggling with this. So I just want to make everybody happy. And then, everybody say this is just the perfect language. I don't think that's going to happen here. But where I'm pausing on the language you brought forward is the other argument that still is dominant in my mind that has been made, is that would be above and beyond what we already have in statute with the other negotiations for labor unions. Can you try to make the case for me as to why the healthcare negotiation requires additional language over and above what we have for VSEA and negotiating their labor, municipal entities, and otherwise? Why do we need this additional rigid threshold, or additional language, not even rigid threshold, but language calling out and speaking to the cost aspect of this, more so than what is already baked in?
So I think one major difference here is that I believe with those state negotiations for like the state employees, the legislature votes to fund those, whatever the results are. And in this case, that's not the case. They are, it's included in school district budgets throughout the state. So it's a bit of a different setup. And you have, the legislature has control on the back end of those other situations.
Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Glowski. So I was unclear why you think it's unbalanced to have that. Why do you think that shifts it one way or the other?
The reason that I think it shifts it is because you're removing in H81 the language that requires premium responsibility percentage and out of pocket to be the same for each plan tier for all participating employees. That language is cost control language. It's getting taken out. And so that changes the dynamic, and it tips the scale in favor of one side by taking out that language. And I'm not really sure that adding in balancing language is going to tip it, to be even, but it would at least be something, and it would at least send the arbitrator the message about the expectation for issuing a decision that is balanced.
Right. I guess I'm not seeing it so as an unbalancing, because, the teachers on the other side are also taxpayers and also want to have a healthy system. And also that one difference in payments may or may not be negligible in the overall healthcare costs of the state and of the taxpayers for the education system, because there's so many other things at play. So it doesn't seem like, in my mind, that it's tipping the scales one way. It's just allowing for a different negotiation, which kind of may or may not be negotiated, one, and may or may not actually change the price of healthcare. It may or may not have a bunch of other benefits. So it's not as clear to me that it's an unbalancing. I get it that it's a change from the statute. It's not a change from the way the bargaining went last time, but I get that point. And I had another question. Oh, about the extra language about trying to tell the arbitrator to weigh it differently. But in addition to what Senator Chittenden said about the existing language, it seems like that's what arbitrators do. Like, aren't they already balancing everything? Like, why do we need to tell them to balance things? Like, what is it that an arbitrator does if they're not kind of looking at both sides and the different impacts? You know what I mean?
Well, you said a lot there. So I think on your first point, I probably would just disagree with you and say it will be interesting to look back in a couple of years and see what the impact of this is. As far as your second question goes, I think we saw with the first round of bargaining that it is important in this situation to provide guardrails for the process, because the first decision was so lacking.
Right, and I agree. We needed to have guidelines of saying this is how you need to explain yourself. And maybe the arbitrator did all the things that we wanted, in this case, he to do, but maybe he didn't. He just didn't write it down. So he's like, yeah, you got to write it down and explain it all. I agree with that part, but I don't know if we need to say, oh, by the way, here's a double extra balancing language.
I don't think it's double or extra. It's really the first time balancing is, and the only time that balancing is mentioned in the statute as in the bill, as far as I can see. So I don't think it's.
Isn't that what an arbitrator does, is balance the two sides? I mean, find the best result?
An arbitrator does balance the two sides, but they need to look at the law that that is applicable to what they're deciding. So.
Right. Okay. That's fair.
Senators, I am getting to the point where I can't make a motion to move things, and I don't want to rush anyone. I want people to have the time that they need. But I think we could, and I appreciate everything that we continue to hear. It's starting, and I could be misinterpreting. It's just the back and forth. I think we've heard what we need to hear. And so I'm looking for senators to propose amendments, to propose idea changes, concept changes, language changes. I'm looking for, we could certainly move something this afternoon or tomorrow, depending on how everyone feels. I want us to go in eyes wide open, and a couple things I'll say about that. I think we're trying here to, and please others weigh in, we are trying to benefit low income or low wage workers, I would say, making certain that those who are working at our schools, making certain that they have a voice at the table in this regard. And I believe, I wasn't here on the committee last year, but I remember some of this discussion in the Senate. I believe that's the genesis of this work. We can certainly, I see moving in two different directions. We can vote and advance this down to approps, where they can take additional testimony, learn more about the financial impacts, et cetera. They can even assess, some of the work in the bill. If it doesn't move, and that is again up to the committee, then this would certainly impact these upcoming April negotiations. So I just want to give everybody the background that they need and the information they need, and also to understand the timeline as it relates to this work. Senator Chittenden.
I support moving this out of our committee to appropriations. So if that's not a motion today that you're ready for, Chair, I'm happy to make it today. I don't know if we need to wait at all, but I just want to say one thing on Jay Nichols' testimony. I fully hope and support him working with Jeff Fannin to find somebody that they can both agree is going to think of the principles in these negotiations. I reflect on my GMT experience. The administration of the Green Mountain Transit often had to accepted the health terms negotiated with labor, and they didn't feel like they were always represented the way that we were trying to create parity. So I see that to create or to break down some of that us versus them that you too often see in organizations with labor unions, I really hope that Jeff Fannin and the NEA, who I believe is going to be the one determined to be able to appoint 3 members, works with Jay Nichols to make sure the principals, who do an extremely important and hard job in our schools, has somebody that they feel has the experience, the connections, and the right will to represent the principals in these negotiations.
Senator Hooker, and then Senator Lyons.
I agree with Senator Chittenden, and I think that our purpose as a committee is to look at this as a collective bargaining bill, and as far as the finances go, the Appropriations Committee is far more in tune of what is necessary in that regard. So I would agree that we should move it forward today.
Senator Lyons.
Well, as much as I hate to agree with Senator Chittenden, I agree with Senator Chittenden. So yeah, I think Jay Nichols raises a very important point, and I agree. I hope that folks can get together and resolve some of the issues that we've heard about. So, and I do agree with you, Senator Chittenden. For once, I know it's been a long struggle.
Senator
Made my day, Jenny. Senator.
Senator Persler.
I do not agree with Senator Chittenden, but I do agree with Senator Lyons.
Great. Great.
Oh, we're such a bad committee.
I know, right? Okay, so I someone can make a motion, or we can wait. I look to the committee on that, since chairs cannot make motions.
I come from Chair.
Please.
I come from a city council where we're always cautious about motioning things that haven't been necessarily warned. Is it at all inappropriate to make the motion this afternoon? I see Senator Terenzini is not with us.
Yep. So we did put it on the agenda for a possible vote, but that said, point well taken. We will put it on the agenda for tomorrow for a vote, and that will give. I will let the pro tem know, and this, with rules, suspensions, etc., I believe we can still work out the timing. When I did the calendar over the weekend, I think we'll be okay. And that also gives others, and I think that is the fairest way to do it. Any discussion on that or concern? Okay. I will let the pro tem know that that is our intention, to move the bill tomorrow to appropriations. It doesn't preclude them from getting started on some of this work, even though I know they have other work that they're doing. And it also gives Senator Persler time to start drafting his floor report on this bill, which will take longer than Herman Melville took to write his American classic, Moby Dick. I'm hoping he has his notes from last year. Thank you all. Just an update on S100. I had a good early morning conversation with Senators Starr and Pearson. They are working on the dollar amount with the Appropriations Committee on S100. I've also had a conversation or a text chat with Mr. Nichols, Ms. Glowski, and Mr. Francis. They know that that Appropriations is looking at that question of from where should the money come, and that is their question. But we still, Senator Pearson and Senators Starr are also reviewing the Agency of Education language. I believe you were in there this morning, Mr. Demare?
I was just there this afternoon, just before this.
In agriculture or in, were you in ag this morning?
I was in ag. Boy, where was I this morning? I was just in Senate Appropriations talking about S13 and S100.
Okay. Do you want to provide us any updates? I know that Senator Lyons had a 415, but there are others here who might just want to hear a little bit of where things are at.
Sure. So on S100, it's all about where the money is coming from.
Yep.
And I think they wanted to come back to you maybe and have that conversation a bit further. And also to see what federal funds might be available. If there's going to be a essential source of funding,
Okay.
at least for the next couple of years, can extra funds be used or some federal funds? That debate's very much alive, so not clear where that's going.
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
Yeah, that debate's very much alive.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what the central issue there. S13 was interesting because they got into a big conversation around whether this is a legislative task force or group or not. And I guess there are 4 members who are members of the General Assembly on that, and then 2 who are not. And it came up to who's giving support for that committee. Is it AOE basically hiring the consultant, doing that work? Or is there going to be JFO doing it on behalf of the legislature? But the bill is kind of in between the two on what it is in terms of is it legislative in nature or is it more administrative in nature? And where's the support coming from on that? So I know that Chair Kitchell is going to speak to Senator Pershlik about that further. And they want to get that resolved for tomorrow.
Yes.
And oh, sorry, one more thing on that. They also asked whether you had heard from AOE in the State Board of Education on that bill. And I can't recall. I don't think the State Board came in. I can't recall if
the
French.
Agency of Ed, I know, was in at one point. But yes, I don't think we had a rep from the State Board in with that bill.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's a lot of work. So I think the question, I mean, Senator Kitchell said, well, it's really an implementation task force. That's usually done by the administration. So maybe it should be AOE.
Yeah.
You got 4 out of the 6 members being members of the General Assembly. So it's just kind of like, it's not quite clear what it is in terms of that question.
Do
Andy,
go ahead. Is that what you were just going to ask, Chair?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. What was your question?
Do we have a preference?
Right. I mean, it seems to me that it would be, I know the agency testified that they were not equipped to take on a lot of work. But this seemed like it was in some ways a compromise where they would take on some of this while able to, again, send out an RFP to get a consultant in that I think would do really the bulk of the work. So that's sort of the way I was thinking about it, but that's just me. Senator Pershlik.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I think it is more of a legislative because there are going to be policy decisions. It's not just it's not just implementing. There are some opportunities to move some levers in the way you implement it, and those will have impacts on policy or, things that the legislature is going to have to vote on.
Yeah.
So, and given AOE's concern about capacity, even having them do an RFP and managing the contract to the consultant, maybe that's better that it's JFO, which makes it closer to the legislators. So on if asked, that's the way I would think of it, as more of a legislative, not as an administrative task force.
I mean, and that's fine with me. I think certainly given AOE's concerned about the workload, that would solve that. That's for sure. And I think your point's a good one. There are some real policy decisions in there. Any objections to that, anyone? Okay. And so I don't know, Mr. Demare, if you think approps will have to amend our work to get to clarify what Senator Perchlik pointed out.
It would have to, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But Jim, do you think it needs to be amended either way because it wasn't clear?
I think either way you go, it should be amended because it's not. I think that I think who actually does the RFP and the consultant isn't clear.
Okay.
So that needs to be clarified anyway.
Okay.
And they had some changes, small changes to the way the expression of choosing members of the task force or implementation group. They want it written chair of the committees or designee, as opposed to how it's written now, which is a member of chosen by the chair. So small changes there as well.
Who drafted this for us?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm totally joking because if seriously.
I tell you though, it's the first bill I've drafted that has a majority of the legislators on. So this is a new area for me too, actually.
Oh no, yeah, I just please. Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, you're doing amazing work. Okay, so Senator Perchlik and Mr. Demare, you think you have what you need to talk to approps tomorrow, and I'll give the chair a call tonight, also just to touch base with her on this.
So are they going to let us know when to go to approps? I saw the email, but I didn't have it.
Yes, usually Chrissy will send a link. In general, I've been sending the reporters of the bill, but just let me know what you're comfortable with. I know Senators Hooker and Chinden were there, and I was there on literacy.
Yeah, I haven't been yet.
Yeah, Chrissy usually will send a link. Great. Jim, so anything else on that before we move to S1? So S100, it sounds like still a lively debate in approps around where the funds might come from. And that is where, of course, that conversation should be had. And then I sent Senators Starr and Pearson this morning the language that came from Mr. Fisher that you put into into that draft amendment for us, thinking that really is our jurisdiction. Were you in Ag this morning to talk about that language?
Yeah, it's been a long day.
I know, it seems like.
I can't recall where I've been today. I've been everywhere today. Let me see. I was in Sen Ag this morning, yes.
Great.
And there was a question raised around that language. I think the question, they wanted to hear from the agency to understand the language better.
Okay.
So it's really a question that the agency coming in and testifying, I think, on that language. There's a piece about breaking down the information by like student level, and they weren't sure what that meant. So I imagine it means by grade level, but then they were like, why? So the agency needs to explain their language, basically.
Right. You know if they're having them come in tomorrow?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, that sounds fine. I left it with Senators Starr and Pearson. Come back to us, let us know the work that you need from us. And we also talked about whatever is decided. Hopefully both committees can be in agreement where we could do a joint floor amendment, knowing that you're going to get 11 people have seen any kind of amendment, and both groups would endorse it. Anybody have any questions or concerns about that or that approach? Okay. Jim, thanks a million.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Really appreciate it. Okay. Unless anybody has any other questions or concerns, Jeannie, would you take us off live?